Hello and good afternoon. My name is Lee Ullman and I'm a senior director at MIT Sloan's Global Programs. I'm in charge of the MIT Sloan Latin America office that's based in Santiago, Chile. Today, I'm really excited that we have Isabella Loaiza speaking to us about her research on designing tools for the future of work. This talk today is part of our MIT Sloan Latin America office seed funds talks. Isabella was awarded seed funds from the MIT Sloan Latin America office. Each year, we provide funding to faculty and researchers across MIT that are going to work on projects either with or about Latin America. And Isabella was awarded these funds last year. So without further ado, I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. So Isabella is a PhD student in the Human Dynamics group at the MIT Media Lab. Her work focuses on understanding how to design tools to help people work with instead of against machines while reinforcing agency and self-determination. Her main focus areas are migrant and refugee relocation, urban mobility, and career design. So please, we're going to welcome Isabella. Before we do that, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the question and answers or the chat. We'll be reading through them. She'll probably take questions at the end, but if there's anything pressing, we can interrupt her and let her know that you have a pressing question. Also, si quieren poner preguntas, dudas en español or in Portuguese, we'll be happy to take those questions as we can translate them, even though I imagine Isabella herself will be able to read them. So just in case, please feel free to join in this interesting talk, get involved, ask questions. That's why you're all here. So thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Jacqueline Taylor, Javier Aldunate, and the team from MIT Sloan Global Programs. And thank you to all of you who are here today to hear Isabella. So Isabella, it's all yours.
Thank you, Lee. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today to share what I've been working on in the last couple of months and to answer the question in the chat. Yes, that was originally the title of the talk, but we changed the topic because the data provider that was going to allow us to study informality in Colombia, actually that deal fell through. So we're going to be working on a different topic, but I still hope it's interesting to you. So let me try to share my screen. All right. Can people see my screen or not? Yeah, okay. Can you see my screen? Can you see the presenter mode, or can you see the actual presentation? Hello? Okay, the presentation, perfect. All right, great. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm starting to design some tools to help us navigate this new world of work that has mostly been impacted by AI, new technological progress, and automation. And I'm going to try to not just talk about kind of the big macro dynamics that are ongoing, but how can we actually build tools to help individuals in their everyday choices when they're trying to figure out what is a career that will allow them to pursue their interests and pursue a better possibility of prosperity for themselves. So just for some context, my group in the Human Dynamics Lab, we work on the new economy. So different people work on different aspects of the new economy. Particularly, my advisor likes to focus on the data as the new capital type of research, where he's trying to understand how to use data to infuse or reinvigorate the economy. But because I'm usually more interested in humans and how can we help humans interact better, I focus on human capital. And that is what we now call the future of work. So in the future of work, there are different forces that are trying to shape what we normally think about what this future is going to be like. In particular, a lot of people talk about technological progress. So obviously we now know with ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Stable Diffusion, a lot of people are wondering, what is going to happen to my job? Am I going to be automated out of the economy? And then what's going to happen when the robots come for our jobs? And this is only one of the forces that is actually shaping how the future of work is going to look like. Another force that became more prevalent after the pandemic was the rise of remote and hybrid work. While there have been many workers who have been working from home in the last couple of decades, it was only after the pandemic that we realized that we could work from home or have these kind of more hybrid models of work at a larger scale. So now a lot of companies, as you may very well know, are trying to find a balance between this flexibility of being able to help their employees work from where they find it they're most productive and most comfortable, but also being able to pull everybody as a team and not compromise productivity and company culture in these new arrangements. There's also the force that is task and skill automation, which some folks over at Sloan have studied very, very well. And some of them actually say that some of this automation has led to a polarization of the US labor market, where we have a lot of occupations in the high skill spectrum of things, and a lot of new work or new workers in the lower skill of the spectrum, but all the kind of mid-range skill workers are kind of disappearing and going into these two different spheres, because a lot of this more clerical and what they refer to as kind of the lower white collar work is more susceptible of being automated out by some of the new tools that we're creating. And then finally, there is the rise of gig work or the gig economy, which I think is particularly relevant in Latin America, because given that we don't always have these big corporations that can employ people, a lot of us in Latin America have to do our own startups and do these gigs to be able to have enough income to live. So this is just kind of the context in terms of technology-enabled forces shaping the future of work. But in addition to these forces, there is more traditional vectors of change that will also shape how the future of work is going to look like. In particular, we're concerned about the growth in the population and the aging population. And as we have seen in Latin America, there are going to be a lot of large-scale migration events, not only because of political instability, but also because of environmental risks and environmental events. And all of this is going to be encapsulated in this big challenge that we have as humanity, which is climate change. And that will obviously change the way in which we work, how we organize, because it will make working out in the field a lot more difficult. It will have a lot more harsh conditions, but also it's going to, hopefully we can find a way in which we can incorporate environmental aspects to our work, so we can not just work to produce more material prosperity, but also not necessarily do as much harm to the planet. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about how the model of work has changed in time. Previously, in kind of the pre-industrial era, we used to have a craftsmanship model of work where a a craftsman would actually take a product from start to end and produce this one item with all of his knowledge and all of the quality that they could muster. Then when we had the Industrial Revolution, factories allowed people to segment the production of these goods into groups of tasks. So one person was no longer responsible for the product from start to finish, but they just had to do one little bit of that product. And then that's what actually shaped the notion of work that we have today, where a lot of economists, in particular, some of the economists at Sloan, think of work in terms of a job or an occupation as a bundle of tasks and a bundle of skills that people perform to do something to help produce a product or service in the economy. In this previous era of work, these bundles of tasks were stacked very neatly in almost a linear fashion. So you knew that you went from occupation 1 to occupation 2 to occupation 3, and you didn't really have to think that much about it because the path was almost kind of set for you and it was very obvious. And it was also set up in terms of a ladder. We used to really believe in the notion of career ladders or career progress, where each new occupation would be a stepping stone for a higher and higher step in this ladder. But now, in the new economy, this is not necessarily the case. We see that because of gig work, because of remote and hybrid work, and the speed of change that we're actually experiencing, occupation and your career trajectory is no longer linear. Jobs are no longer going to be step 1, step 2, step 3 towards this thing that we call success. It's going to be a little bit more varied. It's going to be more of an exploration process than it used to be in the past. So in this new economy, we're going to have, you can have traditional work arrangements, but then after you're done with that particular job, you can have non-traditional work arrangements, and you're going to have a mix of these different types of work throughout your life. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that in the US, people tend to have an average of 12 different jobs in their lifetime with a tenure of about 3 years per job. And the expectation is that this is only going to increase, not only because changes in the labor market are happening more quickly than ever, but also because people are going to live longer lives, and longer lives means longer careers. So for those of you that might be looking forward to retirement, I say good luck with that, because we're probably going to continue working later and later in life as time goes on. So another thing that I wanted to mention here is that the tricky part about these transitions, which is different from the transitions that we used to have in the past, is that obviously they're non-trivial. We don't know what follows a particular job. And once you're, for example, engaged in gig work, it's not so clear what is your next step, or how do you actually go back to more formal, more traditional types of work. So this can leave individuals a little bit disoriented and not knowing where to go. Additionally, because technology has allowed us to perform tasks outside of the context of a normal job or an occupation, we are now facing a change in resolution. So before, these bundles of tasks were tight, they were sealed. We didn't have to interact with this extra layer of tasks and skills that have now been torn apart by technology. And I don't know about you, but if you go to ONET, which is one of the largest databases on occupations in the US, and you look up your own occupation, they will list all the skills and all the actual tasks that you have to perform for your job. But if you had asked me to list all of the skills that required to do my job, I could probably name 3 or 4, but I probably wouldn't come up with the 10 or 15 different skills that ONET says is important for me to have in order to do my job well. And same thing with tasks. Maybe I can tell you one of my tasks is to clean data, to do analysis on data, to make visualizations, but there's a myriad of other tasks that I perform every day to do my job that I'm not necessarily aware of. So this change in resolution from occupations and kind of monolithic degrees to tasks and skills is difficult for us as humans to understand, because we went from having one or two items to think about to having a ton of different options, a ton of different little things that we need to take into account. And obviously it's not something that we're used to thinking. So that's kind of where I'm coming from when I say that we need to have tools to help people navigate this new world of work. So just to summarize, in the future, we're going to have more transitions, more alternatives, which is good. We're going to have more alternatives more quickly, but this can lead to more confusion. And I'm not the only one saying this. Here I have two quotes from, the first one is from Eran Benanav, who is a professor at the University of Syracuse. He has studied the history of unemployment throughout history, and he has also started to really think deeply about what it means to have a future of work where, in the context of capitalism and in the context of a slowing engine of growth. And then many of you probably know Harari, who's the author of *Sapiens*, and he wrote a wonderful history of humankind. And both of these people actually show concern about there's going to be so many different options that it's going to be more difficult for individuals to make a choice and to actually plan out their careers. And in particular, Aaron is concerned about the fact that not knowing how to make this choice might disempower us. So what I'm saying is we need to build tools to actually give people back agency, to empower them to make better decisions about their career. And then I will also show you one cartoon which I particularly like. This is from a book called Work Disrupted by a very important person at Deloitte, where he says, we do need better ways in which we can navigate the world of work because it's no longer trivial and it's no longer apparent. So I'm going to talk about two different tools that I have built. The first one is called Next Move, and this is particularly about how to help 3 different kinds of people navigate the future of work between now and the next 5 or 6 years. Obviously, as more drastic changes happen, we will need to have an update our tools, but I do think this tool is a good transition tool between now and what might end up being a very different future of work. And then I'm also going to show you Voyage Viewer, which is not necessarily directed towards the future of work, but it is a tool to help migrants integrate into labor markets where they arrive and they actually don't have any information about how to start getting jobs or where they should go to. So Voyage Viewer is a different tool that I built before, but I wanted to show you the finished prototype so that you can actually imagine what the tool is going to be like. And then after I show you that tool, I will lift the veil and show you all the analysis and work that goes into building a tool like this. Obviously, as you can probably tell from the talk that I've been giving, providing agency and actually building tools that embody human values that I care about is something that is very, very important to me. I sit at the Media Lab where a lot of people are extremely excited about technology. We tend to be optimists when we think of what technology can do for us. And I think this is amazing. But because I come from where I come from, a developing country, I also know that we need to be careful about the potential negative consequences of the tools that we build. So in order to build the tools that I'm building, I want to use a value-sensitive or value-driven approach in order to make sure that the tools that I build embody the values that I care about. And I try to minimize the unintended consequences of the tools that I build. So this framework has 3 different stages, which are iterative, and they don't have any particular order in which they need to be followed. They're just there to help you really go through the steps when you're trying to build a tool. So these 3 steps are conceptual investigations, where you identify the stakeholders, where the direct and indirect stakeholders, and what values do you wish your technology to embody. You have the empirical investigations, where you use either data-driven, it can be quantitative, it can be qualitative, techniques to understand your user, the challenges and opportunities that they face. And then you have the technical investigations, which are a little bit more about the actual design of the technology, the interface, user testing, if your tool is actually being able to convey what you want to convey. So now I'm going to show you a little demo of the Voyage Viewer tool that I mentioned, and then I will go into the next move. So this should be a video. Okay, there, it's playing. So Voyage Viewer has 2 different parts. The part that you're seeing now is the world page, where you can see migration from a bird's eye view. You can look up different incoming and outgoing migrations to different countries. You can select the time frame that you want to see. You can see, for example, how many asylum seekers, how many refugees, the different types of migrants that go from here to there. This was a very difficult data integration challenge, because we took data from many, many different public sources, and then trying to get all of that data to speak to each other was quite challenging, but I do think it ended up being quite nice. And it's also a good tool for people who are not necessarily tech driven, and they can create beautiful visualizations to convey some of their concerns or things that they are looking for, because we made everything clickable, downloadable, and you can use all of these images for your own particular reports. And then there is the second part, which is the one that is a little bit more similar to the tool that I'm building, which is the people like me. So for those of you who might not be aware, in Latin America, we had a huge migration from people from Venezuela coming to all the other different countries. I am from Colombia, so we did get a lot of folks coming over from the neighboring side. And a lot of these people probably didn't know where to go. So we wanted to build a tool so that they had a better idea where people like them actually went, and show them their prospects for employment in these different cities. And also, as you can see here, we were able to compare, thanks to the data that was available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Colombia, how migrants versus locals found jobs. And we were able to make more informed recommendations for these migrants, so they could have a higher chance of integrating into the labor markets, to the communities that they were wanting to go to. So now that you have seen what the prototype of the tool might look like, I'm going to go back to the topic of the future of work and tell you a little bit about how I'm going to build the tool that is going to look a little bit like this. So for the next move, which is the name of the tool I will build for US workers in transition, it was important for me that the tool embody the values of autonomy and self-determination, just like with the tool for migrants. I want workers to be able to be empowered and make decisions about their own future, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to go and see what happens, and hopefully luck is on my side. The other value that I want to preserve is obviously privacy. All of the information that we're going to show is going to be aggregated and anonymized, because we respect people's privacy and ability to control their own data. We want to promote equality. Sometimes people on the higher skill end of the spectrum have better resources to understand how to navigate labor markets, while people that are on the lower skill spectrum might not have the same opportunities. So hopefully with a tool like this, we can kind of level the playing field a little bit. And obviously, we also want to foster social mobility, both in terms of social mobility of having a better life, but also mobility in terms of space. I didn't know this, but in the US, people are becoming less and less mobile, and people are moving less out of their hometowns, which is not necessarily bad, but definitely it can be a challenge if economic opportunities lie outside of where you are. We want to encourage people to pursue these opportunities. So we identified 3 different users for the tool that we're going to build. They're going to be newcomers to the labor market. So for example, people that are graduating from school, people that are getting their first job would fall under this category. We have relocators, like I mentioned, because Americans are moving less and less. We want to encourage people to pursue their dreams and pursue better financial opportunities that might lie outside of where they currently live. So relocators is another type of user that we're going to target. And finally, gig workers. Like I mentioned before, gig workers might be at a disadvantage in terms of information because gig work is such a new phenomenon that we don't necessarily know what are the most or the best paths from gig work to other types of work. And we don't know how to help them navigate the labor market as much as people with traditional occupations. So gig workers are going to be a third kind of user for our tool. The data that is going to go into the tool is data that we got about, I think it's 5 or 6 million users in the US, and we have all of their work history, all of the history of where they actually did these jobs and the dates in which they did those jobs. So just as an example, we can have information about 3 different people. We know their titles, we know the years in which they did the jobs and the places. But because their titles are in natural language, it's harder for us to compare these different titles. So we use unsupervised machine learning to try to map these natural language titles to SOC codes, which are the occupation codes that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses to codify all of the information about labor and wages and tasks and skills for the US economy. So from this, we go to this using eBERT and other data analysis techniques. So now, because they all have the same code, we can compare their different trajectories. And we can also infer other information about what they know, what skills they have, and what wages they earn. So from that, we go to this and we supplement our data with, again, wages, all the information about the different abilities that people have. We also use the Carnegie Classification Index to infer the quality of education, because we have information about people, where people went to school. And we have other resources to actually check for cost of living and other attributes that might be important for our models. So I wanted to start the analysis with the type of users that we call relocators, just because I had built the tool about migrants. So this seemed like the most natural transition for me, especially because I had been very interested in how people move around in space and integrate to different labor markets that are not their local labor market. So this is where we're going to start. And here we ask, how can we help people advance their careers through relocation? To answer this question, what I decided to do was run some experiments. And the way we're going to run these experiments is by doing some propensity score matching. We do the matching based on people's education, the date of entry to the labor market, their origin city and occupation, their destination city, and their destination occupation. And then in order to understand how relocation can affect your career prospects and your wages, we're going to have 3 different treatment conditions that we're going to compare against a baseline. So the baseline is, imagine somebody who has job A in city A, and then after 2 or 3 years, they continue to have job A in city A. That is the baseline. The first treatment is going to try to measure what is the effect of just changing jobs. So the person that is in treatment 1 would continue to be in city A, but would have moved from job A to job B. The second treatment is meant to capture the effect on your career prospects and your wages from changing cities, but not changing jobs. So imagine a person that is in city A with job A, they would move to city B, but would still continue to have job A. And then treatment 3 is actually, we wanted to see if there was anything special about pursuing an economic opportunity that was either different in terms of your job and different in terms of the city that you reside in. So a person living in city A with job A would move to city B with job B, and then we see what impact that would have on your wages. So in order to understand if relocation can be used as a tool for advancing in your career, we used 2 different data sets. The first one is from Future Fit AI. It was a smaller data set, and that is the yellow, the plot with the yellow bars. And then the second plot is using data from another company called Burning Glass. And what we find, and that was very exciting across both data sets, is that if you change your jobs and not your city, you do get a wage premium. And this is corrected by the cost of living. So it's not, it doesn't have to do with, oh, I moved to New York and I get a higher wage because I'm in New York and I just need more money to be able to pay my rent in New York. This has been corrected by cost of living. So this is what we call the disposable income. So you do get a premium when you change your job. You also get a premium when you change your city. But when you do both at the same time, you get a premium that is a lot higher than if you do each of the other things independently. So what my advisor likes to say about this effect is you go big or go home, or something like, if you are willing to take a risk because you're willing to change both things at the same time, then that is repaid in terms of higher disposable income for you. And we see this across the 2 different data sets. And we do see this across the different times in your career when you make the changes. So if you see the change or the premium that you get is a lot higher as you move up in your career, but it is constant. Even if you change in your 3rd, 5th, or 7th year, you will see a similar effect. So now we wanted to understand what is driving this effect of, well, if I change both my job and my city, then I get a higher disposable income premium. So we built a model, and I'm sorry about the table. I don't like this table, but I thought some people might like to see the stars and the actual coefficients. And we tried to explain what actually leads you to have this premium. And it turns out that the factors that are associated with your job are the ones that influence this wage premium the most. Then second are city-related factors. And then the third one is how far along in your career you are, which is kind of, it influences that effect a little bit, but not as much as the previous 2 categories. And in particular, we see that how cognitive the transition is, meaning if you go from a lower cognitive to a more cognitive job, you will see a higher premium in your wage, but it doesn't matter what we're measuring the transition. So it doesn't matter if you are already in a cognitive occupation, as long as you go to a more cognitive occupation, you will see an increase in your wage. Something that I was quite interested in, I didn't expect the coefficient to be so large, is automation. We actually got information about the probability of automation for each of the jobs from a different work by some folks over at University of Chicago. And we see that if you move from a job that is very automatable to a job that is not automatable, you will see a very, very large increase in your wage. So this is the model that we're going to use in order to make the recommendations for people when they are using our tool and they say, hey, I have this occupation, I live in this city, which occupation should I pursue and in which city should I pursue it? So this model is going to help us suggest or make better suggestions for people so that they can plan for their careers a little bit better. Now I'm going to move on to gig workers. And to be honest, we're just starting to dip our toes into this particular user base, because in the relocation or people that are trying to relocate, we have a lot more data. And even though we have millions of people in our data set, we only have about 5,000-ish gig workers in the data. So it's a lot more challenging to also identify them because there is no particular job code that says I am a gig worker. So we need to actually do a lot of string matching to match for the companies that we know do gig work and the particular jobs they do in that company. So it does take a lot more time to actually pick them out of the data and be able to study them. But because I knew I was giving this talk today, I wanted to bring you something that other people haven't seen. So I made these two different plots to show you a little bit what we're thinking about. So like I mentioned, when you're a gig worker, it's not necessarily understood which occupations you come from and which occupations you go to after gig work. So when you come from a traditional occupation into gig work, we see that there is a lot of occupations that lead into gig work. We have about 233 occupations for the people that say that they have done some gig work. Particularly the one that we're looking at here are people who work for ride hailing gigs, so Uber, Lyft, and we also included other similar to ride sharing like DoorDash, and I'm blanking out on the other two, but something similar to that. And we see that they come from a very wide background of occupations. And because they come from many different backgrounds, there's actually 31% of people that we were unable to map with SOC codes. So we need to do further work to try to see if we can either rerun the algorithm or something like that so that we can map it and we can compare them and include them in our data set. And then when people leave gig work and they go back to more traditional forms of work, we actually see that it's not so varied. They come from 233 different occupations and they go to only 182 occupations. And if you see the two plots, the one on your right actually looks a lot more concentrated. So 20% of the people after they've done gig work in Uber or Lyft or all these apps go into formal work. But this formal work is also related to transportation, and it's about 20% of them that go to this work. While before they came to gig work, all the other occupations are a lot more uniformly distributed. So this is just to try to show you that it's not apparent beforehand what the trajectory of gig workers is going to be. So that is the analysis I've done so far. We hope to do something similar to what we did with relocators so that we can provide a more informed model for gig workers to understand where they come from and where do they go to after they have engaged in gig work, if that's something that they want to do. And finally, I'm going to show you how the mock-ups for the actual tool will look like. So this is just a static picture, but because I showed you the Voyage viewer before, you can kind of imagine how this would work when a user is actually interacting with the tool. This in particular is a mock-up for a relocator type of user where they have typed in their current occupation, the target state where they want to go to, the highest degree of education that they have attained, their experience, and where they're willing to relocate. And then based on that, and based on the model that I presented before, then this person can start to see the different occupations that people like them have gone on to perform in other places. And the thing here is, this is not just based on frequency, but we're going to weight this by how frequent transitions are, but also how much the different factors associated with these occupations increase your wages based on our model. And then the second mock-up is whether which places people like you go in the US. And we're going to show you in which places that people go to is the wage rank of that occupation. How does it compare to the local economy? So you can see how well you would do in that particular place based on the wage that you might attain. And to finish, I want to say that obviously this work is not finished, but I'm really looking forward to further incorporating information about skills, and particularly what I call offline or online transitions, so basically gig workers, and also something that might happen in the farther future is I would love to include some information about a transition to a green economy. While not all of us have the the skills to go work on wind turbines and, all the wonderful things that people are doing so that we can replace fossil fuels, we can definitely try to transition to jobs that might not have such a detrimental effect on the environment. And if that is one of the values that you care about as an individual, I would love to facilitate the opportunity so you can transition towards jobs that actually align with your values. And with that, I'm finished. I have extra slides in case people have questions. I also have slides about the Voyage Viewer. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. There are a couple of questions that are in the chat. One of which that I think I'll start with, which is a really interesting point, and it's exactly what you somewhat mentioned. Coming from Latin America, there is a lot of movement south-south across countries, but does your new tool allow for people to understand what are the local, regional, and national regulations? Because, right, it's not always so easy. Again, we know the Venezuela situation where I think it's now over 2 million people have left Venezuela. As you mentioned, many have gone to Colombia, but Chile, Peru, Brazil, and many of these countries have been very, very open to allowing Venezuelans to come and work, but others less so. So will your tool account or help people understand what local regulations are? And I hope that, Oscar, I'm asking your questions correctly.
Yeah, so we did think about this. Obviously, it's always very difficult when you're a migrant and you come into a country and you want to be able to work there, and you need to have the specific paperwork and all the magic papers that are going to allow you to do work legally in that country. And that is very, very difficult to navigate. I'm not a lawyer. I don't think I could be able to advise people in that regard. In the Voyage Viewer, we did have some links of interest. So we linked, we have a different page where people can, be redirected to government websites in case they want to find out more. So that's the way that I'm trying to get across this problem. But in particular, we wanted to help people once they have their permit, or because I don't know, I think in Colombia in the beginning, at least, it was relatively easy to get a permit. I think the previous president was tried to make several waves to help people get people their PIP, I think it was called. And once people have that, they were like, okay, now I can work, but where should I go? And that's where the tool would come in and tell you, hey, people like you with your skills, go here. And if you do go here, please keep in mind that 80% of the people that go here are employed, but there's 20% of the people that are unemployed, and help you make decisions based on that type of information.
Thank you. And we have another question from an anonymous attendee, and it says, I'm not sure whether your research focuses on population decline in a broader sense or not, but I was wondering, what is your take on how technology/automation might help us navigate through as the population is taking a nosedive, largely in developed countries? So I imagine places like Japan, places like Italy, where computers or machines are supposed to help some of those issues, or new technology.
Yeah, in particular, I don't focus on population decline. I'm trying to mostly focus on what's going to happen when we have longer careers, just because we live longer, and we're going to have to make more changes and more shifts that are not necessarily traditional or common in the world today. So far, I really haven't thought that deeply about how automation can help us with population decline, but that's certainly a topic that I think some folks should be looking at.
Thanks. So Isabella, a couple of questions that I had, and I was curious, is would it be possible to show us the tool live? Or I know it's always dangerous to show live tools because you never know what's going to happen. So I know the Media Lab loves to show videos, but would you be able to run us through one of the LATAM countries, whether Colombia, and see what it looks like in terms of understanding? Because it looked really great, but it would be wonderful to see, many of these people tuned in, thinking that they'd learn a little bit more about Colombia. So getting a sense of your home country.
Well, I think the server has crashed. Like I'm trying to go on the website and I think the server is not working at the moment. But I can definitely circulate the link once I go in and figure out why the server is being naughty today.
No, and that's why the videos are so helpful, right?
Yes, I will never again. I tried it once to do a live demo and I was never again.
Yeah, no, so I think it would be great if you could share the link, but something that you mentioned that I think is interesting, and it has to do with a little bit of a larger picture. So you said that especially the Media Lab people at MIT tend to be optimists about technology.
Yes.
I know that someone who is part of Sandy's group, David Schreier, who's not
Oh,
around,
yes.
loved to talk about how positive was, but I think your point of the negative consequences of technology is really important for people in developing countries who not always have access or ability. But I wanted to take that idea a step forward, and thinking about your model. Can you talk a little bit about what you said in terms of education, right? You're coming from MIT.
Mhm.
As much as people like to believe we do other things, the real goal is to educate people. And so how do you see your model in terms of people who are aspirational or hopeful for the future about what they should do in education, or how should they look at their future in terms of exactly what you said, that the world is changing, people will have various occupations.
Mhm.
A fact that I always find interesting is that everyone talked about programming, but now with GPT, you don't need to program, you just need someone to correct programming. So can you talk about that? And then I think we have two other
Sure.
questions coming in.
So there's a bunch of people, including some folks over at Microsoft Research, who talk about how in the future we need to be prepared to unlearn, learn, and relearn. And there's also a lot of talk about upskilling and reskilling programs. I think the governments are doing their best in this regard. Unfortunately, governments tend to be a little bit slow, and the changes that we are experiencing in the labor market are really, really fast, and governments are unable to keep up, right? Even in the US, even in developed countries, upskilling and reskilling programs are sometimes, leaving people to do a 1 or 2 year upskilling program. And then when they're faced with the reality that when they have already reskilled and they go into that particular job market, they find that there is no more jobs left because there was a ton of people who did this program a few months before them, and now they have these jobs. So I think that definitely in terms of education, we're going to have more flexible bits of programs. So something that's not a year or two, but maybe something quicker that will allow us to be more agile in the way that we navigate the labor force. And also, I do think that people who are willing to experience different paths and people who are willing to be a little bit more adventurous in the directions that they take. So not, for example, a lot of people now, when they might go to school for biology or arts, and then they end up being data scientists, which is not necessarily a traditional transition, but they were able to identify that this is where the jobs, were at the moment, and they made that kind of crazy left turn and they were rewarded for it. So in the future, we're going to have to also be more adventurous and be willing to explore more.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson. Unfortunately, as you know, in Latin America, if your degree doesn't have an engineer next to it, it's often hard. So hopefully the region itself will change, because I think what you said is so important. So Monica has two questions. And before I ask them, Juana, yes, we're going to post this video. Isabella gave us permission. It will be on our YouTube, the MIT Sloan Latin America office YouTube page, so that you can see it later. So Monica's questions, and I'll ask them together. What's the difference between gig worker and freelancer? And have you factored in age differences, particularly for elderly people? What are you finding? And I think her question is important because you mentioned people are going to have to work longer. So it would be good to get a sense of that.
So for the first question, I think that the difference between gig worker and freelancer is that it's kind of the resolution of the kinds of jobs that you do. So a gig worker does a task, right? A task can be image labeling, can be delivering food or taking you from point A to point B. Well, a freelancer can be somebody who takes on a kind of more traditional type of job. They might just not necessarily be associated with a company. So I think that could be one difference. But definitely, even in the data, we see that people who work for all these gig platforms like Upwork or I want to say LiveOps is the other one. They also describe their jobs as freelancers. So the distinction isn't super clear cut, but that's how I think about it in my mind. And the second question, which is about age, well, when I showed the difference in effect for people who relocate and change jobs and do both at the time, we looked at these effects in different points in your career. So we looked at them in your third year of your career, the fifth year in your career, and the eighth year in your career. And for some, we were able to look at them in your 10th year of your career. So obviously, when you're in your 10th year of your career, you're not necessarily senior, but we are trying to incorporate this kind of more longitudinal aspect to the analysis, specifically because we know that time is going to be particularly important as we live longer lives and have longer careers. So what we see in the data so far is that the effects or the premium that you get from relocating and changing jobs grows as you become older. But with our current data, unfortunately, we're unable to disentangle whether the fact that we're seeing this is because you're becoming more specialized or more senior, or you're particularly good at your job because you've been doing it for so long that people are more willing to give you this incentive so that you will relocate to where they are. But that is work for the future as well.
And then there is a question from Guillermo. These workers are only American or US, or are they foreigner also? Because you showed some maps that showed Spain migration or cross, and then you showed the US at the end.
For the voyage viewer, for the world map, we use data from the UN and other available public data sources. So for voyage viewer in the world page, it's for all of the world. For the people like me in voyage viewer, I use data from DANE, so the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Colombia in particular, because they had amazing surveys they were very detailed, and we could really see different aspects of the migrant experience. Also, because I'm Colombian, I know how DANE works, and I knew exactly where to go look for the surveys. And for the next move in our data set, we do have a lot of foreign workers, actually. So it's people who work in the US. I'm non-American, but I could be in the data set because I work in the US, or I'm a grad student in the US, so I could be included there. And yeah.
So will these tools be open source? Are you going to provide them? What's your goal? Or once you're done, what do you hope to do with it?
So I think for us, as we do things in the Media Lab, we like to move fast and break things. These are prototypes. So my goal is to have a working prototype so people can see what is possible. But as a team of one person, I think I would be unable to have a full-on supported production product ready for people to use. I would love it if somebody who's very entrepreneurial was like, hey, let me build this as a real tool for real people. And I would love to collaborate with that. But as a one individual person researcher, I think it would be a little bit difficult for me to have a production product that people could rarely use from anywhere.
Excellent. And my last question, I know Sandy works a lot with the UN. Have you thought of the ILO as one place to partner with or see if they would be interested?
This is a great idea.
All right. Well, glad you got something out of this. So, and we could talk after about that if you need a contact. So, Isabella, really great. I think this is fantastic work. I think the issue of immigration and technology and jobs is important for everybody as the world between climate disasters and wars keep on changing. So thank you so much. Thank you all in the audience. Thank you to Global Programs, to Jacqueline and Javiera for helping out. And please tune in. Jacqueline had added the YouTube page, but if you have any questions for us or want to learn more, please don't hesitate to contact us. So thanks again. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.